There is a moment when you realize your tastes in attraction have matured. I recently hit my mid 30s and had the terrifying realization while watching Death Note that suddenly Light was not the heartthrob of the series. It was Daddy Yagami. Maybe I've got mature enough to realize that physical attractiveness doesn't excuse mass murder, but anyway, this last year I've become fascinated with a trope that's popping up all across anime and manga that I've encountered: Old Man Yaoi. It's not like this is anything new per se. Older men as potential ships have been a thing in anime for a long time and in nearly every genre. Attack on Titan had us melting over Keith Shadis and Theo Magath sharing a heartfelt moment on a literal ship. And Bungo Stray Dogs, it slapped us in the face with Fukuchi and Fukazawa's unrequited love in seasons 4 and 5 when it was already pelting us with Fukazawa's other side piece Mori alongside him in seasons 2 and 3. Even staple shonen have potential Old Man Yaoi pairings, like Gold Roger and Garp, or Gold Roger and Raleigh in One Piece. And if you consider men in their 30s to be quote-unquote old, then this extends to shonen possible pairings such as Isshin Kurosaki and Ryukin Ishida, or for sports anime ships like Freeze, Ryuji Azusa and Mihail Makarovich Nitori, or Haikyuu's Coach Ukai and Takada. But I wasn't going to settle for potential Old Man Yaoi that was unconfirmed in mainstream anime. No. I wanted the good stuff. The canon. I wanted to dig deep down into the dark recesses of the yaoi genre and see some legitimate Old Man Yaoi and find out what the appeal was and if there was a reason for my developing obsession. So today, we are going to explore some of the best Old Man Yaoi examples that I have encountered based on my own research and social media recommendations. Now, I'm always dreading making video essays like this because I realize how dated they are, and as soon as it's published, y'all will have found some Old Man Yaoi example that I didn't think of that was perfect for this video, and it makes my video obsolete, and we're just gonna have to deal with that. So before we start, I do want to acknowledge some recommendations I was not able to read or watch for this specific reaction based on they were either too long or could become shows or manga that I would want to read or watch in the future. So those recommendations were from Okami Draws Art, Shawa Genroku Rakugo Shinju, which is actually a 25 episode anime that I could watch in the future. Einery Private recommended the 21 volume manga and live action series What Did You Eat Yesterday? Tanya and Bunny recommended Tiger and Bunny, which is honestly a definite will probably watch on this channel series. So I'm excited there's Old Man Yaoi in it, but I will hopefully get to it in the coming year to come. So that's exciting. Jin Linlaw recommended Zetsui 1989. I haven't had the chance to experience this series, but I hope that in the future it could further enhance and appreciate my knowledge of Old Man Yaoi. And then literally right before I recorded this, I had from Be Happy the series The World's Greatest First Love. Apparently it is a long-running manga series that has animation with it, and it does have an OVA that features Old Man Yaoi, so I will eventually have to get to that series. And alas, those series will not be talked about in this video. Also, please note, I tried to examine stories that didn't just have couples in their perpetual late 20s and 30s, like Love Nest or Daokusei, or non-Old Man Yaoi examples. Instead, they are, for the most part, legitimate Old Man Yaoi. So, with that being said, let us begin. So I decided to review the top 10 Old Man Yaoi that were recommended to me or that I have encountered thus far in my BL reading adventures, with the transparency that there are probably a lot more yet that I will need to research for future watchings. Most Old Man Yaoi that I have discovered or read and watched involve a protagonist and their partner that fit into one or more of these three categories. They are either the perpetual bachelor, Old Man Yaoi, the bisexual widower and his homosexual bestie, Old Man Yaoi, or the I've known you forever but let's wait till we're wrinkly, Old Man Yaoi. Now that we have the criteria and the stage set, let us begin. And we might as well just get this series out of the way, so let's just get to it. Number 10, Heaven Official's Blessing. I know it's not a yaoi, it's a danmei, but it's one of the best, and that is Heaven Official's Blessing. Now, honestly, this would normally be my number one, but and not my number 10, but there is the question of, is Hua Chong and Shilian actually an Old Man Yaoi? I mean, technically, they are fitting the brief, right? Does it count if the two mains still look hot? I mean, let's face it, there are actually a plethora of Old Man Yaoi couples in this text alone that are hundreds of years old but still maintain a youthful appearance. They're either ethereal ghosts or gods in the story, so does it count? Maybe not. I'm counting it, though, for this. What makes them fit the Old Man Yaoi criteria, though, is that there is a maturity to a lot of the characters that go beyond the impulsive youth, and they show a dedication to one another that can only be known after years upon years of built trust and established connection with that person. Not to say that they can't keep it fresh, though. Shi Lian has such a youthful brightness to him that you almost forget he's nearly half a millennia old. Whether they're experienced or they're 800-year-old virgins, the main characters in love in this series are able to showcase a magic of experiencing romantic love for the first time, while also being old enough to know the importance of effective communication, loyalty, and compassion in a relationship. And even we get to see the opposite presented through the antagonist and their own Old Man Yaoi partner. So you get the best of both worlds with this series. All of the maturity of an Old Man Yaoi pairing, but with the rock-hard bodies of someone in their mid-20s. Seriously, this series is amazing. I'm nearly finished with it in my reactions to the novel and the 2 seasons of the Danhua on the channel, so you can go check out my playlist on Patreon or YouTube if you want to catch up with me and see the Old Man Yaoi pairings of that series. Number 9. It Can't Be Mutual Love by Uka Kasai from the year 2000, recommended by Sherilyn J.M. So this one volume, one shot just barely makes it into Old Man Yaoi, but we'll take it. The story follows a man, Tokizo, who realizes in high school that he was in love with his best friend Shiba. Like you do, who is a fellow soccer player. It's that blue lock effect. It'll do it. But the story fast forwards to the man who is now in his early 40s, who is still in love with his best friend. He's distressed because Shiba just married a woman that's 15 years younger than him after only dating her for 3 months, and he hates the idea of seeing them together now that he doesn't feel like he has a chance to date Shiba. So he talks to his fellow employee Uda and talks him into going with him to spy on Shiba and his new wife under the guise that the employee gets paid overtime for going along, which he agrees to because getting paid overtime is really nice. Turns out that when they meet up, Shiba has already gotten a divorce from the wife, though, because she was cheating on him. And to make matters more awkward for Tokizo, Shiba admits that he now has nowhere to go, and since Tokizo is his best friend, he asks to stay with him for the time being. Now, Uda points out that Tokizo tends to think the worst of situations, but Tokizo is worried that if it finally gets out to Shiba that Tokizo loves him, it will cause their friendship to fall apart. But regardless, he agrees to let Shiba stay with him. What follows is them living together. Tokizo does things for Shiba like cooking that he admits he didn't do for his previous partners in the past, and Shiba notes how much he likes Tokizo's cooking. We find out that Shiba has had a terrible history with women, and we discover it's possible that Shiba has known for a while that Tokizo likes him. Uda is a great character in all of this because he simultaneously plays the matchmaker while also points out how stupid it is that it's taken Tokizo 25 years to confess his love and gets accused by Shiba of being Tokizo's lover, which is when we find out that Uda is actually heterosexual and is in a relationship with a woman. But Shiba is also found out to be as hopelessly in love with Tokizo as the other man is with him. So they're both just old idiots who can't confess. So the story is great because it deals with unrequited love on a long-term scale and how Shiba comes to terms with his own sexuality while Uda has to play mediator to their terrible communication skills. And the story does address Shiba's inexperience with sex, with a man and the trials and tribulations of sexual encounters once your body hits its 40s. Still, it's not overtly spicy. I like to think of it like the Fake series from the 90s. The artwork is unique, the romantic tension between the two of them is hilarious and heartfelt, and the overall volume makes you feel kind of rewarded by the decisions that they make in the end. It's a great childhood friends to lover one-shot that I really enjoyed.
Number 8. Midnight Rain by CTK.
Lillian L. Delgado 77 and Wushin Sweebian actually originally suggested this one to me. The story I did do a reaction and review for as a Patreon exclusive, so if you want to go over to Patreon, you can actually check it out there. So I'm not going to talk a crazy long time about this one, but basically it's a story of two wayward souls, Ethan and Mike, who stumble into each other's lives when they're needed the most. Without spoiling the series' surprises, Mike is a thug doing odd petty jobs for petty cash. He gets in brawls a lot, and he finds sanctuary in the house of Ethan, who seems to have a shady past of his own and is barely functioning day to day. What I like about their relationship is that it's neither the stereotypical uke and seme. I mean, you can probably guess which one is which, or perhaps they switch, but they're both equal characters in terms of their power in the relationship over one another. As with most Old Man Yaoi, these men are experienced enough to know what they want, and they communicate with one another to get it. The dynamic of our leads plays into different aspects of Yashiro from Twittering Birds Never Fly, which I really appreciate, but not in the way that you might expect. Plus, the concept of being gay or their sexuality is not really brought up at all in the story. It's literally just a blossoming romance between two individuals that you wouldn't normally expect. The artwork is lovely for the story as well, and very captivating. And as it's only one volume, it did leave me wanting so much more, but I realized I was being very greedy and I should be satisfied with the solid one shot that we got. I definitely am going to be reading this one again more, so I really encourage you to pick it up if you want a dash of grit, a dash of spice, and definitely a dash of heart.
Number 7. Inu mo Kuanai, recommended by Nobutsoshiki, or as it's called, Despicable. Even a dog won't eat it.
This one shot is 8 chapters long, and it's interesting. It follows a man who becomes involved in this back and forth unrequited love between these two older men. I don't want to spoil the surprises throughout this, but it's very kinky in how these two men are basically having relations with the younger man as a middleman rather than getting together themselves. It's almost like they want to keep the possibility of their relationship like this Schrodinger's box sort of situation. So the younger man just indulges in the situation, and we find out that he actually had a crush on one of the older men 10 years ago, but he doesn't think the older man remembers him. And he's reluctant to bring it up since it seems that the older man is still hung up on the former friend. So through this series of kinky back and forth situations, I like that the relationship takes some very interesting turns with each other, and I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the three manage to communicate with one another in the end. The series focuses on the idea of communication and how life is short and you shouldn't waste time going after what you want. The song Love the One You're With also kind of comes to mind, and we don't have to settle for one person to love. We can actually love multiple people while still caring for one another onto an equal extent. Which is unique for a romance, because usually it's like, you're the only one for me. And this story says, well, it may not work out for you to end up with who you love forever, but that doesn't mean you can't love someone else as well. It's a really refreshing message and a very spicy one-shot. The story itself takes place over 5 to 6 chapters, and the remaining side story is about this Yakuza love story that actually ends really tragically. Again, I'm not spoiling it. I won't say that Inu mo Kuanai is my favorite of the entries on this list, but its themes were really refreshing, and it's definitely one of the more unique entries on the list. So if you get a chance to read it online, I definitely recommend it.
Number 6, Naked Sword and the Tree Peony of Black.
Okay, so this BL features a 30-year-old Kurai at the start of the story, and I was like, 30 years old, really? Old Man Yaoi? Okay. But he's been recently promoted to the Wakagashira lieutenant of a Yakuza group, and he has this rugged Yakuza boss type look, And his friend, Shirakawa, who is this bespectacled will-be love interest, is also an attorney and reveals that he's getting married. The story immediately cuts to 7 years later, and we find out that he was only married for a month, then got a divorce, and now they're both 37, so closer to Old Man Yaoi. And Shirakawa confesses to Kuroi, who swats it away. Honda-kun, one of the Yakuza, reveals that everyone kind of knows about their mutual relationship with one another. We find out Kuroi says that he's dedicated to the Yakuza group, and as in most Yakuza love stories, he's not going to change his relationship with Shirakawa. We find out that since Shirakawa is not technically Yakuza, Kuroi does not want to implicate him further. And it's basically a twittering birds never fly Yakuza trope at this point, right? So Shirakawa, though, reveals that he has taken a position as the attorney for the Yakuza group, which is the one thing that Kuroi did not want him to do. Shirakawa is so sly and sensual, and Kuroi is so abrasive and passionate. It works off each other in this really interesting way. We find out the two are actually born 3 days apart from one another, and they grew up literally since they were infants. So it's this really interesting take on the childhood friend story. And we see that Shirakawa notices the Yakuza upbringing and how it's affected Kuroi since he was a kid, and how he develops into a young adult because of it. It's also really cool to see Kuroi develop from a little kid to being this like really attractive young man, and it's really easy to see why Shirakawa would be attracted to him. What's even more interesting is that he's this lone wolf to Shirakawa, but Shirakawa is the dominant one of the relationship. He is the dominant one of the two. He pursues the relationship at high school and is actually the top when they first get together, which surprised the hell out of me because Kuroi seems like the stereotypical seme in the relationship. No, that is not it. Shirakawa is a seme, and he is like a sly fox of one. I love, though, that Kuroi is so passionate about keeping Shirakawa away from the Yakuza group because he loves them and he wants to keep him safe, while at the same time, Shirakawa is incredibly dominant, commanding, persistent, and stays on Kuroi's level the entire story. Now, this is barely an Old Man Yaoi, but I love the dynamic of Kuroi and Shirakawa and how there are certain Yakuza tropes that are explored throughout their relationship. The series is spicy. It has plenty of young and nearly Old Man Yaoi references and romance sequences, and it doesn't get too into the Yakuza elements, so it gives us that BL lovin' that we're wanting and doesn't waste our time. I would definitely recommend checking it out.
Number 5, Koi ga Ochitara, or When Loves Falls, and Koi ga Michitara, or When Love is Full, both recommended by K.A.
So this story focuses on a younger man, Issei, who has been accused of being like a mom and to his other lovers, and this older man, Kishimoto, who just divorced with no way to take care of his cooking or cleaning. So it's match made in heaven, right? Issei is openly gay from the start of the series, but questions whether the recently divorced Kishimoto is actually gay since he just divorced his quote-unquote wife, and he just seems to be looking to experiment in a relationship with Issei. Now, clearly Kishimoto has experience and he's a salaryman who can put charm on Issei. I mean, Issei's not really used to a relationship with a man that's older and more worldly like Kishimoto, so it's a totally different experience for him. Issei is concerned, though, that because Kishimoto is supposedly straight or heterosexual, he's just flirting with Issei and eventually he's going to go back to women, so there's no future with him in a relationship. The two end up making out, but they break up because Issei believes it's a mistake, and we find out Kishimoto feels pretty insecure. Now, of course, Kishimoto, being the Old Man Yaoi that he is, he does not have the problem of young boy miscommunication. And he does not let this go on for too long, though, and initiates a conversation that reveals Issei's insecurities to him. And Kishimoto's like, you worry too much that things are going to go wrong. If you do that, you're never going to experience relationships that could go right. And Kishimoto reveals that he could possibly even be pansexual. So it's not that he's just into women. He's like, I don't really care about gender. I'm just into romance. And Issei's like, well, but if you date me, you could lose your job. And Kishimoto's like, yeah, I've been at the top of my business for a while now. They're not gonna fire me. Which is important to note because there are some entries on this list that I've yet to talk about that have that whole, but they'll find out about us at work plot line as a major anxiety inducer. And it doesn't end up being an issue for them here, at least in the first volume. Now, speaking of being on top of his job, Kishimoto is a very experienced top and treats Issei quite well. They end up moving in together, and the first volume ends really sweetly. Now, the second volume is called When Love is Full, and despite them both being individuals who were previously dumped in the past, their relationship seems to be going well, and Kishimoto, he's the hottest old man ever. I mean, we start out volume 2, he looks amazing. Volume 1 was spicy, but a large part of the sequel volume is just them doing it constantly. And Kishimoto is like insanely hot for Old Man Yaoi. I mean, he starts to get busy though with his job, and Issei starts to feel the busyness, and then this redhead mofo shows up, like you do, named Shirakawa, and he tries to get into Issei's life and kind of become this wedge between the two of them, as one would expect. And then they have this small fight, and from it, Kishimoto, he ends up going back to work. He gets hit on by this girl named Ishida, who's had a crush on him. And I'm like, look, girl, I get it. He's like a 50-year-old Nanami Kinto. And so, understood. But again, Old Man Yaoi trope. Luckily, he immediately tells her that he has a partner, and that's not going to work. So the two end up making up. They go to an onsen, and they just freaking get it on. Like, a lot. If you're wanting smutty McSmutterson Old Man Yaoi, then this is definitely for you. It's not big on stakes or drama or angst. It is literally spicy and smutty with some cuteness and adorable younger men and a super hot Old Man Yaoi goodness. So yeah, I would definitely recommend both of those volumes. But we're in the top 4 now, and so we're getting into probably my favorite of the Old Man Yaoi genre that I was able to look at for this video.
Number 4, Old Fashioned Cupcake, recommended by My Chai.
Yeah, this series grabs you by the heart and shakes you repeatedly and then gives you a spoonful of sugar to satisfy you at the end. It tells the story of 39-year-old Nozu, who is aging, has a string of bad relationships, and it follows his blossoming office crush on Tagawa, who is a handsome and dedicated man who falls in line with literally Domeki in terms of devotion. And he's fit as hell. Nozu is insanely relatable as someone that has insecurities about themselves, how their partner views them, their own purpose in life, and I couldn't help but root for him, even with his less than stellar communication skills. So this series definitely makes you want to shake Nozu with the miscommunication trope, but the sweetness of the two of them bonding outside of work and realizing Tagawa has just as much of a crush on Nozu as Nozu does on him is precious. You want them to be happy, and while this 2-volume series gives you your cake, it also makes you work for it. So there are a few spicy scenes in each volume, but the majority is this adorable romance that blooms between the two of them. There is angst. There's questioning about how relationships develop, from the crushes between the two of them to living together to long distance relationships and beyond. It handles everything with a lot of maturity, a lot of realism, and a lot of heart, which is pretty typical for Old Man Yaoi. So one day I would like to watch the live action version of this series because I know it exists, but in the meantime, I did do a Patreon exclusive reaction, and it is a long one, to both of these manga volumes, so I would encourage you to go check it out there. I highly recommend this 2-volume series. It will satisfy your sweet tooth. It will give you this beautiful office romance with just the right notes of angst and spice.
Number 3, Itushiki Hibi, or Our Lovely Days, recommended by Sunspots.
So this is a legit Old Man Yaoi. Love it. It starts out with a 55 and 65-year-old couple, so definitely Old Man Yaoi standards. And from the first chapter, it is not afraid to get spicy and show that age does not entirely affect one's ability to love one another, both figuratively and literally. So the second chapter shows them at ages 18 and 28. So our main couple is 10 years apart, and each chapter focuses on them at a different portion of their life, and it goes backwards and forwards in time. We find out they met with the older Makoto being hired on to be a tutor for the younger of the couple. Obviously, at this age gap, the relationship is a lot more awkward. There's this nice slam against soccer in the chapter as both of the characters announce they prefer baseball. So, Blue Lock versus Ace of the Diamond, am I right? The two end up hitting it off great until the mother suggests that Makoto and her son are getting close, which causes Makoto to leave his job as tutor. The two end up secretly teaching each other, and Kazuhito, who is the younger, confesses to Makoto, who believes that he's too young to have a crush on him. Which I appreciate that Makoto is trying to be the serious one. I also love the line that Kazuhito drops saying, "There are no sample tests at life." So we go from there to chapter 3, which is of them at ages 30 and 40. And Kazuhito is involved in a car accident, and Makoto suggests that they adopt one another, which is basically, since same-sex marriage isn't recognized in Japan, it's so they can be considered to be quote-unquote family. Basically, Makoto has to become Kazuhito's adoptive father in order to visit him in the ICU, which is ridiculous. But here we are. So they decide to get rings and to officially get married. Makoto has some lingering thoughts, thinking Kazuhito would eventually get tired of him and want to leave him. But Kazuhito's like, nah, I'm still smitten with you. It's fine. Chapter 4 is of them at ages 60 and 70, where Kazuhito retires. There's more spiciness between them, which I like the fact that the spiciness is more when they're older, like in their 50s and 60s and 70s, than in the younger chapters. I appreciate that. It makes the Old Man Yaoi aspect feel richer, right? And of course, during all of this, the topic comes up that I was afraid we were going to have to address, which is death. Specifically, Makoto asks if Kazuhito would be scared to go out and pick graves ahead of time. And it's a short chapter. It makes you feel sad because the chapters are getting shorter and shorter, and you start to worry that one of the characters are going to die. Chapter 5 is of them starting out at ages 70 and 80, and then it cuts to them being at ages 61 and 51. The chapter talks about them in their 50s and 60s when their older age starts to set in, but Kazuhito wants to make sure that he is in the future with Makoto. The two make a will to each other to be read if either one passes, and they promise to take care of one another. Chapter 5.5 is the last chapter, and it's a really sad chapter where we see the aftermath. I'm not going to spoil it for you. But this entire series was an insanely touching love story, and getting to see them actually grow up and grow old together was beautiful. It's nothing gritty or crazy. It's just a very sweet and somber love story that hits all of the notes of Old Man Yaoi to perfection. So I have 2 series left, and number 2 is Jealousy. Yes, Jealousy, the series that made me want to make this video in the first place. Yeah, I read this series back in November of 2022, and I spent a year trying to talk myself into making a video about it. It never happened. I kept running out of time, or I wasn't motivated, but I just couldn't get the motivation or the time. But the series is really, really good, especially if you like Yakuza romances. I'm a sucker for a good Yakuza story, and this is one of the better ones that I've read. It's a 5-volume series that goes through the young adulthood to adulthood life of a Yakuza head Akitora, who comes to collect a debt and meets the debtor's boyfriend, Rogi Uichi. Rogi Uichi is a larger-than-life character. He's like Yashiro from Twittering Birds Never Fly that becomes infatuated with Akitora. Uichi is someone that quickly realizes they could fit into the Yakuza world a bit too well. So it kind of has the opposite issue of Twittering Birds Never Fly in regards to the characters. One thing that's really unique about this series is that the love interest Akitora, who is the Yakuza head, he has a wife and son and has a great relationship with them. He loves his wife, and his wife is amazing. A lot happens in this series, but I love the wife's character. I love her relationship with Akitora and Yuichi. They form this very intriguing, complicated love triangle where you actually root for everyone in the triangle. It's kind of just, you want them to just make an Old Man Yaoi sandwich and she's in the middle, which is kind of what happens. So a lot of the story is about them when they're younger, and there is a lot to unpack with jealousy. So I'm just going to fast forward to towards the end of the series where, spoilers, they get older and they get together. So I'm not going to reveal how, because I would really like you to read this series, but it's sexy, it's heartbreaking, it's well written, and Rogi Yuichi is one of those characters. He's like Tom Hiddleston playing Loki. He has this vileness and villainous presence to him, but there's this vulnerability, and you can't help but become captivated by his character. I will say the ending makes me love the two of them so much as a pair, and the entire manga encapsulates this idea about how we change based on the people around us and their impact on our lives, the idea of true love and everlasting love, despite the messed up world that we might live in at times. Now, there's a sequel manga, and it's not as good. It's okay, but I definitely encourage you to read the Jealousy series, at least for Uichi and Akitora. At least get the final volume so you can see the Old Man Yaoi goodness between them. And that leads us to the other series that made me want to make this video in the first place. My number one Old Man Yaoi. It's so cheesy. The title's gonna get you, but it's Don't Call Me Daddy, the prequel to Don't Call Me Dirty by Goro Kanbei. Okay, this may be my favorite Old Man Yaoi because it's just so adorable. Now, to understand Don't Call Me Daddy, you need to also know about its prequel, which is Don't Call Me Dirty, or She's All That, the BL. Literally, this 2-volume set is worth it even if you don't like Old Man Yaoi. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free on that, so you could check it out there, but I'm sure it's also available through other retailers as well. Don't Call Me Dirty, we should talk about it first because it's the prequel and you kind of need to know a little bit about it before we jump into Don't Call Me Daddy. It involves this young man named Shoji who is going through a breakup while he's working at a grocery store that keeps getting patronized by the hottest of homeless men named Hama. He is basically Rachel Lee Cook with glasses and paint on her overalls. He is the king troll under the bridge. He is the himbo of hobos. And he says basically nothing except that he seems like an exceptionally shy adult that just happens to be drop dead gorgeous. The first volume follows Shoji coming to accept that he's attracted to this Adonis that just hasn't bathed, and eventually gets him to open up enough to reveal that he lost his job and he didn't know enough life skills to figure out what to do next, so he just kind of wandered around South Park style homeless. The premise is hilarious, but I do like Shoji and Hama's relationship. I definitely recommend this story for all of its fluff and ridiculousness. The part that is important in all of this, though, is his relationship with his father. Shoji's dad, Mita, who thinks he's tech savvy but isn't and posts way too much on social media, is revealed to be childhood friends and former, maybe closer than friends, with an attorney named Kaji. And that leads us into Don't Call Me Daddy. So the sequel focuses on the father, Mita, and his relationship and his friendship turned love of Kaji. Ryuji Mita and Hanao Kaji grew up together. We find out pretty quickly that Hanao is gay and that he's had a crush on his childhood friend his whole life. Ryuji's ex-girlfriend dumps their son, Shoji, on his doorstep, and Mita begs Hanao to help him raise him, which he does agree to until Shoji is in elementary school. Shoji reveals one day that he is in love with a boy at school, and Hanao realizes that Shoji is homosexual like he is, and he fears the world that Shoji is going to grow up in, and that he will have this unrequited love like he believes that he has with Shoji's dad now. Now, Mita gives off a lot of mixed signals in this story, and the audience can kind of pick it up really quick with how close he is with Kaji, and you kind of start to wonder, is Mita maybe bisexual and doesn't realize it? But of course, Hanao does not believe that is the case at all. So there's this moment in the manga is utterly heartbreaking. Kaji goes to pick up Shoji from school, and when he arrives, Shoji tells all the kids at school that him and his dad Kaji are married. Because he says, I see them together. They sometimes sleep together. And we find out, sometimes when they put Shoji to bed, they fall asleep next to them. They're very touchy-feely. Shoji believes that Kaji and Mita are married. And it's very awkward. Kaji freaks out and says that he has to leave before Shoji gets bullied at school. And he doesn't want everyone to get the wrong idea. And he doesn't want Mita to get targeted with ridicule. He feels that he doesn't deserve that. So he tells Mita this and leaves him and Shoji so that they won't have to go through anything negative.
I mean, this scene is heartbreaking enough, and it makes like your stomach drop to the bottom of your body. But what sold me on this series as a whole was the scene that comes right after it. Shoji, he comes home and he has this crumpled up picture of him and his crush, and he tells his dad that his crush called him weird. And how Mita reacts is so good. He just hugs Shoji. He gives him absolute love and hugs him and shows him he accepts him. And that moved me. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm sold with this series. Let's go. So we cut to 20 years later. And Kaji's aged a lot, as has Mita. And in the law firm that Kaji's working at, there's this young physician that works with him that tries to hit on him and reveals that he's gay too. But it proves to basically be ineffective. He thinks the young man's too young and he's not interested. He gets assigned to a case that leads him back to their hometown, and that's where he reunites with Mita. And it's a little awkward at first. The two have to kind of learn how they've changed as people over time and over the last 20 years. And Shoji confronts Kaji, and he says that he's mad at him, but not because he left. He's mad at Kaji because he believes that he left because he thought he was grossed out by Shoji being gay. And Kaji admits, no, I'm also homosexual, and explains why he left. And there's a really cute moment where Shoji's like, oh, well, you know, you're like the first homosexual person I've talked to around here. Can I rely upon you and talk with you? It's really nice, right? So, of course, you know, Kaji starts to slowly integrate himself back into Mita and Shoji's life. And Mita starts to go find out where Kaji works at. And during this time, the physician that's been hitting on him shows up, and Mita straight up pulls the Sasaki from Sasaki and Miyano, where the physician's trying to get real close to Kaji, and Mita kind of inserts himself between the two of them and is like, no. It's great. It's a wonderful moment. It also leads to Mita and Kaji getting drunk later on in the next scene, and Mita admits that he did try to get back with Shoji's mom and form a family, but their marriage didn't even last a year and it didn't work out. Instead, he says he really wishes that he could have had Kaji with them instead of his ex. So there are a lot of romantic tropes that happen from this point on in the volume, and I don't want to spoil too much, but it does lead to Mita and Kaji kind of confessing with one another. I'm not going to say any more. I don't want to spoil. It's glorious. It's wonderful. The point I love most about this series is that in Old Man Yaoi, there is no compromising what you want out of a relationship. And what you want is also for yourself. I love that Kaji, he basically tells Mita at one point, he's like, it's not enough for you to want to be with me just to make me happy. He's like, I want you to want to be with me and be sexual with me and want me. Which is, you know, which surprises Mita. And Mita's like, okay. And he tries and admits that he does want to be with Kaji that way. And it's really nice. We don't get full on spice in this one shot, but we do get some context and we get like aftermath fluffiness, and it's super cute. It's definitely like an entrance gateway Old Man Yaoi and a gateway BL that I would definitely recommend. Don't Call Me Dirty and Don't Call Me Daddy. If you know people that are like, what's BL? Hand them these two series. They're totally safe. There's a little bit of spice, but it's like nothing smutty. It's just enough to be like, this is what BL is. This is what Old Man Yaoi is. Enjoy. So as a whole, what I love about Old Man Yaoi is just the fact that it's two older men that know what they want in a relationship. They know how to communicate with one another. They've been around the block enough to be financially secure. They know who they are and what they want out of life. And if they don't, they're willing to talk with one another to figure it out. And a lot of the tropes that I feel younger couples in anime struggle with do not happen at Old Man Yaoi. And plus, these old men, they've been around the block. They know what to do with their bodies. And you're like, oh, touche, sir. So that is my relationship with Old Man Yaoi. And maybe it makes more sense now why I prefer Daddy Yagami over Light Yagami. Maybe. But I wanted to round out JanuYaoi this year with something fun and something that's, you know, maybe a trope that you've not heard of or you've not explored enough, but hopefully one of these 10 entries has sparked your interest and you'll go and pursue and read it in your own time. I highly recommend all these entries. I hope to one day be able to get to the longer entries that I was not able to read for this video. Hopefully they will be able to be on the channel in the future, but I want to thank Patreon specifically for helping me get together these entries for JanuYaoi this year. I hope you've had fun with all of the entries. I hope it's been a great experience. You've enjoyed the reaction discussions, but if you've not seen the JanuYaoi entries from 2002 and 2022 and 2023, I highly encourage you to go to my channel for JanuYaoi. There's a whole bunch of entries on there. They're a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy. But from the bottom of my heart to all of you, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back soon, everybody, with more reactions. Bye!